Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the News and Views program. My name is Azhar Vadi. You're listening to us on the Facebook page as well as on YouTube. And this is going out on the broadcast waves of Al Ansar in Durban and Peter Maritzburg. And not forgetting the platform, satellite online free to air system of Salam Media, as well as our website, salammedia.com. Now, late last night, we got a message coming through on various WhatsApp groups. And in the morning, we confirmed the passing away of a legendary journalist in the sports field here in the Lenasia, Gauteng area, and that is none other than marhum Iqbal Gaffoor. May Allah fill his qabr with noor. He has passed away, and the funeral details, I'm sure, will be shared with us very soon. But to quickly take us into the life and times of Iqbal Gaffoor, I'm joined now online by Fakir Hassan. And as you know, he was one of the people that we spoke to in the month of Ramadan as well, documenting his life. But now we look at the contribution that Iqbal Gaffoor made to South African society. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fakir, I think you need to turn your mic on there. There we go. Welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam to you, Azhar, and to the listeners. Very good morning. Not a very good one, I guess, when you've lost a very dear friend.
Yes, Iqbal Gaffoor was a long-time journalist. I remember, in fact, as an 8-year-old playing in the Lenasia Soccer Association under 8 for, I think it was Lenasia United at that time. And we would look forward to this bubbly character on the Sunday morning with his camera and his pen and page, taking down the scores and writing, and then the next week you'd pop up in one of the local newspapers and you'd see your picture there, and it would just be an amazing thing to have yourself published and your little, score sheet. And that's what Iqbal Gaffoor represents to me as a youngster, and that's what he contributed in my life. But tell us, where and how did Iqbal get into journalism, and what did he do in the field of sports writing?
Well, I first met Iqbal when he was already, as you say, very much involved in local sport, like with the youngsters. I'm sure there are many, many others like young people like yourself, now adults and young adults whose life must have been touched by Iqbal and his efforts to promote amateur sport throughout Lenasia in particular. So soon after Wade Kamruddin, my dear friend, started the Lenasia Times over 40 years ago. Very soon after that, I joined, and that's when I first met Iqbal. And he was, as I say, doing this thing, going around, and we decided that he would make a very valuable contribution as sports editor. So he started contributing and eventually became sports editor for Lenasia Times. He worked in that role for many, many years. And he and I ended up together on many, many assignments. I wrote a foreword to his book. He published a book called 50 Years of Sport in Iqbal's Life or something like that. I can't even remember the title, although I wrote the foreword. And it was largely a collection of all his articles over those years. And he had approached me a couple of years ago and said this was his dream. And I said I would help you. And eventually I got so busy with my own books that I couldn't really write his book. But I said to him, prepare what you need and I certainly will edit it and so on. And eventually he came back after a few years and he says, I'm ready now. Here's the draft. And I made some suggestions. And then he said, please, 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 you must write the foreword. And I did that. In there, that is now a historic book, not just when he published it, but even now, because I don't believe there is anything like that documenting amateur sport in Lenasia in particular, and Gauteng, as it's known now, from the old Transvaal where we used to work, more broadly. So Iqbal has left a legacy, most definitely. And that book is his legacy. In recent years, of course, he slowed down a bit. He joined some other media as well and contributed there. As online came on, he contributed to online media as well. But he well more recently.
And in one or two meetings that I had with him, and I remember attending a banquet dinner for the Cycle Club Lenasia not too long ago, maybe a year or two ago, perhaps, where we sat together at the table, and he was looking at, and I asked him about why, and he said because of our youth and getting them off the streets and encouraging them towards some kind of sporting activity. This was a passion for him. What were some of the positive contributions in that light that you may think or believe that he contributed to the upliftment of society?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it might be in many instances an indirect contribution that most people would not even recognize or acknowledge. But Iqbal was so passionate, as you said in your introduction, about particularly youth and youngsters. He was out every weekend. I know there were times when his family would be complaining sometimes, like mine, that we always out at weekends doing community work of a different nature, going to events and covering things and so on. And one of the things that stands out for me is when I started, I had more professional cameras, if you will, and Iqbal had his little camera and often ran out of film and so on. Those days we used to use film in the cameras, and eventually he got to become dependent on me for the pictures. So one of the things I wrote in that introduction is that in my basic grounding as a journalist, which started with the Lenasia Times, it was more than 40 years ago, I covered almost everything from why your dustbin is not collected to why politicians are trying to get into parliament with the SAIC, a whole range of things. But one thing I never did was sport, in terms of covering sport extensively. And that was because Iqbal was always there to do that. And I watched him as he not just, he would go to an event, let's say like the event you spoke about earlier. He'd go there, and besides being there to report on it for the Lenasia Times, he would get involved with the youngsters. He would support them. There would be indigent pupils, that or learners, and that were keen on sport, and he would find ways to assist them, get others to assist them, and so on. And in that context, his legacy will live on. Because I'm sure there are many who are adults now, probably in their 30s and 40s now, who would have passed through Iqbal's hands in that way and will remember that. And maybe those are the people who should now be putting their memories together and paying tribute to Iqbal. It's such a pity. I believe this morning his funeral, incidentally, was at 7:30 this morning, just before we came on here. And I'm sure that it would have been one of the biggest funerals in Lenasia if it wasn't for the COVID-19 restrictions. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, one last question. I mean, a lot of the work that Iqbal did was during the dark days of apartheid, and today, with the youngsters just having every opportunity available to them to progress in the field of sport, some just throw that talent perhaps away even. Uh, what was it like being a sports journalist, or some of the anecdotes of Iqbal's work under the apartheid system and trying to do sports journalism?
Well, I'm sure you would have had the same difficulty that all of us journalists had in that era. Often getting our work seized by security police, even as if it was as innocuous as Iqbal sports stuff, uh, getting chased sometimes from events. Often, as you know, sport events would also be used as rallying points for political activism. And fortunately, or unfortunately, I might say as well, amongst the very young, it was not that prevalent. But amongst the older players and so on, in the era of bluebells and Swaraj and for soccer and the vibrant cricket at the time and so on in Lenasia particularly, Iqbal was always there. And there were instances during events such as those where security police would arrive. They would chase even when political activism took place. And yes, Iqbal and I were there on some of those occasions, having to counter that as well.
Absolutely. Fakir Hassan, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for paying tribute to your close friend and the legendary Iqbal Gaffoor, sports journalist in the Lenasia area. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive him, grant him Jannatul Firdaus, give the family sabrun jameel and patience in this difficult time. And hopefully the lessons that he has taught us as youngsters in the Lenasia area will continue to flourish in his name. And we see future journalists taking lesson from the hard work, and dedication that he has shown to the community. Thank you so much for your time. You go well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah.